It's our favorite website. We have reached out.
Okay. Is it possible to edit it once I'm here, or? The feedback, so let me close out of this.
You have to mute the Zoom.
So,
This. Done. Go back to.
this is Zoom. Let me just close out of YouTube.
Okay, are we ready?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So we're on chapter 13,
No.
course number 6 and 7.
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Yes. Or 6. We are ready, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, my dear devotees, all glory to Srila Prabhupada. Sorry we're a little bit late, but better late than never. So, tonight we're hearing Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, and it's entitled Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness, and text 6 and 7. Is that right?
Yes, Maharaj.
Mahabhutani ahankaro udhir avyaktam evacha indriyani daisaikam cha pancha chandriya gochara icha dresa sukam dukam sangatas chitas chetana prati etat chitram samasena savikalam udar uttam. The 5 great elements, false ego, intelligence, the unmanifest, the 10 senses, and the mind, the 5 sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptom, and conviction, all these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. Well, that's a very thorough explanation. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. From all the authoritative statements of the great sages, the Vedic hymns, and the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra, the components of this world can be understood as follows. Okay, so the 5 great elements, false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses, and the mind, the 5 sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms, and conviction. All these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interaction. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. From all the authoritative statements of the great sages, the Vedic hymns and the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra, the components of this world, can be understood as follows. First, there are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. These are the five great elements, Mahabhuta. Then there are the false ego, the intelligence, the unmanifested stage of the three modes of nature. Then there are five senses for acquiring knowledge: the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. Then five working senses: voice, legs, hands, anus, and genitals. Then above the senses, there are the mind, which is within which can be called, which is within and which can be called the sense within. Therefore, including the mind, there are 11 senses altogether. Then there are the five objects of the senses: smell, taste, form, touch, and sound. Now the aggregate of these 24 elements is called the field of activity. If one makes an analytical study of these 24 subjects, then he can very well understand the field of activity. Then there are desire, hatred, happiness, and distress, which are interactions, representations of the five great elements in the gross body. The living symptoms, represented by consciousness and convictions, are the manifestation of the subtle body, mind, ego, and intelligence. These subtle elements are included within the field of activities. The five great elements are a gross representation of the false ego, which in turn represents the primal stage of false ego, technically called the materialistic conception, or tamasa buddhi, intelligence in ignorance. This further represents the unmanifested stage of the three modes of material nature. The unmanifested modes of material nature are called pradhanam. One who desires to know the 24 elements in detail, along with their interactions, should study the philosophy in more detail. In Bhagavad Gita, a summary only is given. The body is the representation of all these factors, and there are changes in the body, which are 6 in number. The body is born, it grows, it stays, it produces byproducts, then it begins to decay, and at last stage, it vanishes. Therefore, the field is a non-permanent material thing. However, the Kshetrajya, the knower of the field, its proprietor, is different. Okay, very wonderful statements here. Text 8 to 12. Amanitvam, Adamitvam, Ahimsa Shantir Arjanam, Acharyupasamam Slocham, Sarayam Atma Vinigraha, Indriyate Suvairakyam, Ahankara Evacha, Janmamatyu Jaravyadi, Dukadusana Darshanam, Ashakti Anavisvanga, Utra Dara Vihadisu, Nityam cha samachittatvam, Isthanistopapatisu, Maichananya yogena, Bhakti Bhavyabhicharini, Vivikta Seva Sevitam, Aratir Jnana Samsida, Adhyatma Jnana Nidyatmam, Tattva Jnanartam Darshanam, Etas Jnanam Iti Proktam, Ajnanam yat ato nyata. Translation: humility, privacy, nonviolence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master. This is Slim.
Not on Maharaj.
Yeah, it's better. Cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, meaning Krishna, aspiring to live in a solitary place detached from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of spiritual realization and philosophical research for the absolute truth. All these I would declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be is ignorance. Well, that eliminates a lot of ignorance in the world. Okay. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. This process of knowledge is sometimes misunderstood by less intelligent men as being the interaction of the field of activity. But actually, this is the real process of knowledge. If one accepts this process, then the possibility of approaching the absolute truth exists. This is not the interaction of the 24 elements, as described before. This is actually the means to get out of the entanglement of those elements. The embodied soul is entrapped by the body, which is a casing made of the 24 elements. And the process of knowledge, as described here, is the means to get out of it. Of all the descriptions of the process of knowledge, the most important point is described in the first line of the 11th verse. Mai chananya yogena bhaktir avyabhicharini. The process of knowledge terminates in unalloyed devotion service to the Lord. So, if one does not approach or is not able to approach the transcendental service to the Lord, then the other 19 items are of no particular value. But if one takes the devotion service in full Krishna consciousness, the other 19 items automatically develop within him. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 5:18-12, Yasyaste Bhakti Bhagavat Akinchana Sarvar Gunaistatcha Samasate Sura. All the good qualities of knowledge develop in one who has attained the stage of devotional service. The principle of accepting a spiritual master, as mentioned in the 8th verse, is essential. Even for one who takes to devotional service, it is most important. Transcendental life begins when one accepts a bona fide spiritual master. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, clearly states here that this process of knowledge is the actual path. Anything speculated beyond this is nonsense. As for the knowledge outlined here, the items may be analyzed as follows. Humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. The material conception of life makes us very eager to receive honor from others. But from the point of view of a man in perfect knowledge, who knows that he is not this body. Anything, honor or dishonor, pertaining to this body is useless. That's a wonderful statement. Wonderful statement. One should not be hankering after this material deception. People are very anxious to be famous for their religion, and consequently, sometimes it is found that without understanding the principles of religion, one enters into some group which is not actually following religious principles, and then wants to advertise himself as a religious mentor. As for actual advancement in spiritual science, one should have a test to see how far he is progressing. He can judge by these items. 1. Nonviolence is generally taken to mean not killing or destroying the body, but actually, nonviolence means not to put others into distress. People in general are trapped by ignorance in the material concept of life, and they perpetually suffer material pains. So unless one elevates people to spiritual knowledge, one is practicing violence. Wow. That means there's a lot of violence in schools today. And not getting any knowledge about Krishna. They're just learning mundane things. Let me read that again. People in general are trapped by ignorance in the material concept of life, and they perpetually suffer material pain. So unless one elevates people to spiritual knowledge, one is practicing violence. One should try his best to distribute real knowledge to the people so that they may become enlightened and leave this material entanglement. That is nonviolence. Tolerance means that one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. If one is engaged in the advancement of spiritual knowledge, there will be so many insults and much dishonor from others. This is expected because material nature is so constituted. Even a boy like Prahlada, who only 5 years old was engaged in the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, was endangered when his father became antagonistic to his son, to his devotion. The father tried to kill him in so many ways, but Prahlada tolerated him. So there may be many impediments to making advancement in spiritual knowledge, but we should be tolerant and continue our progress with determination. Simplicity means that without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. As for acceptance of the spiritual master, that is essential because without the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master, one cannot progress in the spiritual science. One should approach the spiritual master with all humility and offer him all services so that he will be pleased to bestow his blessings upon the disciple. Because a bona fide spiritual master is a representative of Krishna. If he bestows any blessings upon his disciple, that will make the disciple immediately advance without the disciples following the regulative principles. Or the regulative principles will be easier for one who has served the spiritual master with reservation. Without reservation. Without being, without being not enthusiastic to engage in service. Cleanliness is essential for making advancement in spiritual life. There are two kinds of cleanliness, external and internal. External cleanliness means taking a bath, but for internal cleanliness, one has to think of Krishna always and chant Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari. This process cleans the accumulated dust of past karma from the mind. Steadiness means that one should be very determined to make progress in spiritual life. Without such determination, one cannot make tangible progress. And self-control means that one should not accept anything which is detrimental to the path of spiritual progress. One should become accustomed to this and reject anything. Reject anything which is against the path of spiritual progress. This is real renunciation. The senses are so strong that they are always anxious to have sex gratification. One should not cater to their demands, which are not necessary. The senses should only be gratified to keep the body fit so that one can discharge his duty in advancing in spiritual life. The most important and uncontrollable sense is the tongue. If one can control the tongue, then there is every possibility of controlling the other senses. The function of the tongue is to taste and to vibrate. Therefore, by systematic regulation, the tongue should always be engaged in tasting the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Krishna and chanting Hare Krishna. As far as the eyes are concerned, they should not be allowed to see anything but the beautiful form of Krishna. That will control the eyes. Similarly, the ears should be engaged in hearing about Krishna, and the nose in smelling the flowers offered to Krishna. This is a process of devotional service, and it is understood here that Bhagavad Gita is simply expounding the science of devotional service. Devotional service is the main and sole objective. Unintelligent commentators on the Bhagavad Gita try to divert the mind of the reader to other subjects, but there is no other subject in Bhagavad Gita than devotional service. False ego means accepting this body as oneself. When one understands that he is not this body, and his spirit soul, he comes to his real ego. Ego is there. False ego is condemned, but not real ego. In the Vedic literature, Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad 1.4.10, it is said, Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. I am spirit. This I am, the sense of self, also exists in the liberated stage of self-realization. This sense of I am is ego, but when the sense of I am is applied to this false body, it is false ego. When the sense of self is applied to reality, that is real ego. There are some philosophers who say we should give up our ego, but we cannot give up our ego because ego means identity. We ought to, of course, give up the false identification with the body. One should try to understand the distress or of accepting birth, death, old age, disease. There are descriptions in various Vedic literatures of birth. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the world of the unborn, the child's stay in the womb of the mother, his suffering, etc., are all very graphically described. It should be thoroughly understood that birth is distressful because we forget how much distress we have suffered within the womb of the mother. We do not make any solution to the repetition of birth and death. Similarly, at the time of death, there are all kinds of sufferings, and they are also mentioned in the authoritative scriptures. These should be discussed, and as far as disease and old age are concern, everyone gets practical experience. No one wants to be diseased, and no one wants to become old. But there is no avoiding these. Unless we have a pessimistic view of this material life, considering the distress of birth, death, old age, disease, there is no impetus for us, for our making advancement in spiritual life. And that is a very, very profound statement. Unless, let's look at that again. Unless, as far as disease and old age are concerned, everyone gets practical experience. No one wants to be diseased, and no one wants to become old. But there is no avoiding these, unless we have a pessimistic view of material life, of this material life, considering the distress of birth, death, old age, and disease. There is no impetus for our making advancement in spiritual life. Now, see, that's so important. Why? There's so many idiots that say, "Oh, I'm so happy in this world. I have this, I have that, and I don't have any, problems." Blah 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 blah, and they're just lying. Okay, as for detachment from children, wife, and home, it is not meant that one should have no feeling for them. They are natural objects of affection, but when they are not favorable to spiritual progress, then one should not be attached to them. Okay, you see, so we're not against. You shouldn't say, "Well, I read that that Hare Krishnas don't like wives and children." No, that's not true. We love wives and children, but it's when they're not favorable to spiritual progress. In other words, they're engaging in illicit activities, then we should not be attached to them. And that makes sense. The best process for making the home pleasant is Krishna consciousness. If one is in full Krishna consciousness, he can make his home very happy, because this process of Krishna consciousness is very easy. One need only chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Accept the remains of foodstuffs offered to Krishna. Have some discussion on books like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and engage oneself in deity worship. These four things will make one happy. One should train the members of the family in this way. The family members can sit down morning and evening and chant together. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
If one can mold his family's life in this way to develop Krishna consciousness, following these four principles, then there is no need to change from family life to renounced life. But if it is not congenial, not favorable for spiritual advancement, then family life should be abandoned. One must sacrifice everything to realize or serve Krishna, just as Arjuna did. Arjuna did not want to kill his family members, but when he understood that these family members were impediments to his Krishna realization, he accepted the instruction of Krishna and fought and killed them. See, many people can misinterpret that statement. Oh, you're promoting killing your family. No, it's not what it's saying here. Anyway, that's why it says one must sacrifice everything to realize or serve Krishna, just as Arjuna did. Arjuna did not want to kill his family members. They There it is right there. But when he understood that these family members were impediments to his spiritual realization, he accepted the instruction of Krishna and fought and killed them. Yeah. If they're obstructing the devotee from engaging in Krishna consciousness, that's a very serious type of what you would call lusty behavior, and or very antagonistic behavior against the best, say, desires to make spiritual advancement. In all cases, one should be detached from the happiness and distress of family life, because in this world, one can never be fully happy or fully miserable. Very nice statement. Happiness and distress are concomitant factors in material life. One should learn to tolerate, as advised in Bhagavad Gita. One can never restrict the coming and going of happiness and distress. So one should be detached from the materialistic way of life and be automatically equipoised in both cases. Generally, when we get something desirable, we are very happy. And when we get something undesirable, we are distressed. But if we are actually in the spiritual position, these things will not agitate us. To reach that stage, we have to practice unbreakable devotional service or unalloyed devotional service. Devotional service to Krishna without deviation means engaging oneself in the 9 processes of devotional service: chanting, hearing, worshiping, offering, respect, etc. As described in the last verse of the 9th chapter, that process should be followed. Naturally, when one is adapted to the spiritual way of life, he will not want to mix with materialistic men. In other words, you have to give up the association with materialistic people, men or women. That would go against his grain. His grain should be always on the path of Krishna consciousness. But if you associate with non-devotees, they'll try and take you away from that, from the desire to always be Krishna conscious. So therefore, it says, one may test himself by saying how far he is inclined to live in a solitary place without unwanted association. Naturally, a devotee has no taste for unnecessary sporting or cinema going or enjoying some social function, because he understands that these are simply a waste of time. There are many research scholars and philosophers who study sex life or some other subject, but according to Bhagavad Gita, such research work and philosophical speculation have no value. That is more or less nonsensical. According to Bhagavad Gita, one should make research by philosophical discretion into the nature of the soul. One should make research to understand the self. That is recommended here. As far as self-realization is concerned, it is clearly stated here that bhakti yoga is especially practical. As soon as there is a question of devotion, one must consider the relationship between the super soul and the individual soul. The individual soul and the super soul cannot be one, at least not in the Bhakti conception, the devotional conception of life. This service of the individual soul to the Supreme Soul is eternal, nityam, as it is clearly stated. So bhakti, or devotional service, is eternal. What should be established in that devotional service? So, let's see. So bhakti, or devotional service, is eternal. What should be established in that philosophical conviction? In the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.11, this is explained. Vadanti tat tattvavidas tattvam yajnanam advayam. Those who are actually knowers of the absolute truth know that the self is realized in three different phases, as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Brahman is the last word in the realization of the absolute truth. Therefore, one should reach up to that platform of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus engage in the devotional service of the Lord. That is the perfection of knowledge. Beginning from practicing humility up to the point of realization of the Supreme Truth, the Absolute Personality of Godhead, this process is just like a staircase beginning from the ground floor and going up to the top floor. Now, on this staircase, there are so many people who have reached the first floor, the second or third floor, etc. But unless one reaches the top floor, which is the understanding of Krishna, he is at a lower stage of knowledge. If anyone wants to compete with God and at the same time make advancement in spiritual knowledge, he will be frustrated. It is clearly stated that without humility, understanding is not truly possible. To think oneself God is most puffed up. Although the living entity is always being kicked by the stringent laws of its nature, he still thinks, I am God, because of ignorance. The beginning of knowledge, therefore, is amanita, humility. One should be humble and know that he is subordinate to the Supreme Lord. Due to rebellion against the Supreme Lord, one becomes subordinate to material nature. One must know and be convinced of this truth. Wow. The beginning of knowledge, therefore, is amanitvam, humility. One should be humble and know that he is subordinate to the Supreme Lord. Due to rebellion against the Supreme Lord, one becomes subordinate to material nature. One must know that he is convinced, due to rebellion against the Supreme Lord, one becomes subordinate to material nature. One must know and be convinced. Let's go back. Although the living entity is always being kicked by the stringent laws of material nature, he still thinks, I am God, because of ignorance. The beginning of knowledge, therefore, is amanitvam, humility. One should be humble and know that he is subordinate to the Supreme Lord. Due to rebellion against the Supreme Lord, one becomes subordinate to material nature. One must know and be convinced of this truth. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Are there any questions or comments on these remarkably transcendental and wonderful statements by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai? Any questions or comments? Okay, no questions, no answers. Then our takeaway for today is the following. Beginning from practicing humility up to the point of realization of the supreme truth, the absolute personality of Godhead. This process is just like a staircase, beginning from the ground floor and going up to the top floor. Now, on this staircase, there are so many people who have reached the first floor, the second or third floor, etc. But unless one reaches the top floor, which is the understanding of Krishna, he is at a lower stage of knowledge. If anyone wants to compete with God and at the same time make advancement in spiritual life, he will be frustrated. It is clearly stated that without humility, understanding is not truly possible. To think oneself God is most puffed up. Although the living entity is always being kicked by the stringent laws of eternal nature, he still thinks I am God because of ignorance. The beginning of knowledge, therefore, is amanitvam, humility. One should be humble and know that he is subordinate to the Supreme Lord. Due to rebellion against the Supreme Lord, one becomes subordinate to material nature. One must know and be convinced of this truth. Wow, what a wonderful statement I felt that. Thank you very much, my dear devotees. Are there any questions or comments? Questions or comments? Okay, no questions, no comments, and no answers. So we will stop right there. Okay, wow, this is amazing. So this is the